What bothered me most about Levi's approach with you is you said they were saying you were ignoring science in the positions you were taking when the exact opposite would be true. They were ignoring science. There's an interesting study that it's actually not come out yet, but will very soon, by the National Bureau of Economic Research. The authors are University of Chicago economists Casey Mulligan, Stephen Moore, and Phil Kerpen of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. They compare COVID outcome in the 50 states and the District of Columbia based on three variables. They look at the economy, education, and mortality. And they really compare the states like Florida that didn't shut down the economy and the schools to California, which shut down virtually everything and wrecked the economy. And of course, the variable is mortality rate. And there's non-significant difference statistically. They didn't save lives by shutting down and crashing the economy and wrecking these kids' educational advancement. There's no science to support this. So was it simply to cover the fact that they didn't want attention brought to the fact that their kids were in school? What was the motivation?
Oh my goodness, it's such a big question. I mean, why were the doctors and scientists that raised from the very beginning that there was another way? Why were they silenced and demonized? And, there were plenty of doctors. There was Martin Coulter from Harvard. There was Jay Bhattacharya from Stanford, Sunetra Gupta from Oxford. They were deemed fringe, insane people. I mean, these are not crazy people. And they said the path forward is to protect the vulnerable and let children go to school and have their lives. And it appears they were right, but they were absolutely shunted to the sidelines, and not just shunted, but vilified as just quacks and crazy people. So, I think it's not so much about why Levi's did this. It's they're just a representation of what the world was doing. I mean, all of San Francisco was saying what they were saying. Why was there this silencing of debate? Why could there be no dissent? Why couldn't we look at data, which was what I was doing obsessively since the beginning? We were, following these Democratic talking points, and I am a Democrat or former Democrat, as if they were gospel. And frankly, journalists really failed here as well. They failed to interrogate the issue. They printed, CDC press releases as if that was journalism. All of this data was available. If I could find it, why couldn't they? Why couldn't they challenge the narrative? The question is why. For the life of me, Dr. Phil, I don't understand it. I think it started as a response to Trump saying schools should open, maybe. I mean, it started with real fear and panic. Then it was a response to him saying schools should open. Then I think there was this idea that if the Democratic Party was the party that cared about teachers and saving lives, that they would win the presidential election. But it was just at this point in the ether, the fear and the terror and the righteousness that good people stayed home and kept their kids home. And why do you make a big deal of this? You're just an evil, horrible racist who wants teachers and children to die. It's like they couldn't manage the message at a certain point. I'm not sure. Levi's is no worse or better than anyone else. They were sort of caught up in that storm. My feeling is, though, there was a way to handle it and handle it differently. They could have said from the beginning, because employees were complaining about me, and I think that's what really kind of got them. Why not have the sort of leadership and moral courage to just say, you don't have to agree with her. She has a right to say this. She's a public school mom speaking up for her kids and other public school kids. She has a right to say it, and we support her, just like you have a right to say what you believe. And I think that would have ended it. And we could have all just moved forward, but that's not what happened. They fell prey to the angry mob.
And it's interesting now, when you do see the results now, when people have the science staring them in the face, when you see a study that ranks Florida 28th in mortality and California 27th, but Florida is third in the least educational loss and California is 47th, you would think these people would now say, Never mind.
They'll say Republicans wrote the study. That's what they'll say.
Yeah, of course. People can replicate the study. You can get Democrats to replicate the study. You can get left-leaning liberals. You can do blind studies. It is what it is, but no one has said anything back to you about, hey, not only do you have the right to your private life opinion, and oh, by the way, you were right. Nobody said anything like that to you, even off the record.
Oh, goodness, no, nothing like that. In fact, there are reporters writing hit pieces on me. There was one just about 2 weeks ago that I think positioned me as kind of a nut job, who just kind of said really out there things about, with no evidence of what those out there things were, because everything I said, to your point, for the most part, has been proven true. But there is still, this kind of, I mean, I have to say most of the press has been very positive, or at least very neutral and balanced, and, broaches the subject of free speech and what should we be allowed to say as leaders in a company or employees and what should we not. But no, certainly there have been no apologies. And I think there's still an effort to paint me as a lunatic.
It's hard to deny logic. It's hard to deny when you're willing to say, look, I'll talk about this with anybody. Let's just look at the data. People can throw out these allegations, whereas you say, look, let's discuss it. Let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the data. Let's discuss this. People don't want to do that.
They don't. They just want to kind of demonize you and call you names. And it's easier, ad hominem attacks are much easier. And, I should say that the virtual world we all live in makes that easier and makes it worse. It's incredibly corrosive to the way we talk to each other, to the discourse. You can call someone names anonymously. I mean, we had these town halls every couple of weeks. I was called terrible names in every one by anonymous folks from within the company and my own community. I don't think that would happen if we were in person and somebody had to stand up and look me in the eye and call me a racist. I don't think it would. I don't think that would happen. That's not how we engage with each other when we do it in person. And, I repeatedly reached out to folks who were very critical. I got no response. I was very willing to kind of explain my views, but that's not how it works. We just demonize people. And to your point in the opening, we just cancel them. And if you veer one iota from, and I think it's really bad. It happens on the right and the left, but my experience is on the left. If you veer one sort of just baby step away from the kind of left-wing orthodoxy, you are a white supremacist.
You were actually called a racist as part of this. Where the hell did that come from?
Because if you wanted schools to open, which were predominantly populated by non-white children, that meant you wanted those children to die. That's the rationale, the line of thinking.
That's just disgusting.
It's absurd on its face. And, at first when it came at me, I was very upset. I felt like I needed to kind of defend myself and explain myself. Now, frankly, if people come at me with that, which they still do, I just say, I reject that. That's stupid. It's dumb. I'm not. I'm sorry, I'm not. 2 of my children are mixed race. My team was the most diverse team in the country. In the company. Like, look at the arc of my life and what I have done and what I have advocated for. It's a silly, frankly, thing to say, but it's incredibly damaging. It's reputationally damaging. I believe that word alone made me unemployable there. Who wants to keep a racist in the seat of global brand president?
Well, of course. And you were offered $1 million severance package if you would just zip it, right? If you would just not say anymore. Yeah.
As this sort of whole process advanced over the course of 2 years, please be quiet. No, I don't want to be quiet. And I should say, to me, I could not say a thing that was true. Being told you can't say these things that are true is just flies in the face of what our democracy is supposed to be about. And submitting to that seemed very dangerous to me. And I also would say, standing up for kids, I wish someone had stood up for me as a child in this, abusive sport. And so those 2 things drove me forward. At a certain point, they did it. It was actually discussed that I might be the CEO, the next CEO. But they needed to do a background check, and they needed to kind of assess all of this social media presence. And I said, I agreed to it. And I said at the very beginning to my boss, the CEO, I know what you're going to find. You're going to find that it's going to be sort of a gray area, but you're going to determine that it's too problematic for me, not only to take over as CEO, but to work here anymore, which is exactly what happened. He gave me the results of the investigation, which included other things, financial, et cetera. And I was told there's not a place for me anymore in the company, but that I would be offered severance. And I decided to leave on my own terms.
So what's next for you? What do you do now? And then I've got some questions that are a little broader.
I'm sort of figuring that out. I assumed that quitting in the public fashion that I did would mean that I could never work in the corporate world again, which apparently is not true. I do get quite a few calls regularly about corporate roles. So that's an option. I'm going to not avail myself of that for a little bit. I'm writing a book and I'm making a documentary about the harms of school closures to kids. So I want to do that in the near term and figure out what's next. I'm doing speaking engagements, that kind of thing. So I can take a beat and a breath. I need to make a living. I have 4 children, although one is 21 and launched into the world, so I don't have to worry about him as much anymore. But yeah, a corporate job at some point is definitely an option, which I did not expect.